Me first. Hi, everybody. My name's Ryan Wichelns, is how you pronounce that, believe it or not. I am, I guess now formally a full-time freelance writer for Backpacker Outside, basically everybody. I've been doing that for the last 10 years or so, but I'm actually going to start this off by saying what I'm not. I'm not a marketing person. I'm not a salesperson. I would not really consider myself an entrepreneur prior to any of this at all, which I think says a lot about the platforms that we're talking about today. The fact that I can pull off something like this without any of that to lean on. Without naming names, a handful of the publications that I have worked for in the past, there's been a spate of going out of print announcements and other bad news in favor of things that I would classify as less than journalism. So that kind of started me down this path, and I had an idea and decided it was time to do my own thing. And that own thing is Trails Magazine. We are a quarterly quality over quantity magazine for the backpacking and hiking community. Different than the kinds of magazines you're going to find on grocery store shelves. It's not that like cheap, glossy, ad-filled, mass-produced monthly magazine that you can subscribe to for like $2 a year. And then throw away when you've read half of it and the next one arrives. Printed on actual paper, different types of stories, a little bit more of a long form focus. Crucially, a lot fewer advertisements than we're used to in magazines these days. And spoiler alert, people liked that idea. We raised almost $25,000 in less than a month to get the magazine off the ground. We were a project we love on Kickstarter. And had a lot of success with that, but we'll circle back to that. So step one, when we had this idea, was how do we get it off the ground? Like, I'm not a trust fund kid. I don't have anything like that, obviously. So Kickstarter was actually kind of a natural fit for us. A publication like what we're trying to do has a very obvious kind of set threshold. We had to have this much money to get it off the ground, regardless of how many subscribers we have, regardless of how many issues we're going to print, or how many copies of the first issue we're going to print. Costs the same amount to pay all of our contributors. It costs, printing is one of those things where this is how much it costs, and if you print 10,000 more copies, it only costs this little bit much more. So having a threshold made a lot of sense to us. And for those who don't know, Kickstarter in particular uses an all or nothing model, which means you set yourself a goal for what you're going to fundraise. If you hit that goal or go beyond it, you get to keep the money. Congratulations. If you don't get anything. So that made a whole lot of sense for us. That really wasn't a burden right off the bat. But the upside to that kind of model is it gives a lot of confidence to your backers and your subscribers, in our case, and consumer, that they can give you money and it's not going to go to waste. The other option for us was, let's just throw up a website and take subscriptions that way, and that feels a little weird and sketchy, and who am I to be doing that, and why would people be giving money to do that kind of thing? So Kickstarter offers some credibility on that front. Different things you can do with perks and rewards as well that would be a little bit more difficult on a regular website. There's also a set time period on Kickstarter. Most projects do 30 days. That's what we did too. That's kind of in that sweet spot, which lends a little bit of urgency to both the marketing that we're trying to do around the Kickstarter and some urgency for the consumer. Yes, there is a fee associated with Kickstarter. It's like 5% plus credit card fees. It's not nothing, certainly, but the decision we made was that was a worthy price to pay for the marketing and credibility aspects that came from Kickstarter in our case. So getting this off the ground was really just a lot of writing to begin with. People don't realize it, but Kickstarter is a very text-heavy platform. Any project you go onto, there's a lot of scrolling that you have to do, and a lot of reading. So spending a lot of time dialing in the pitch that we were trying to make, making an argument for why this magazine was necessary, why we were so passionate about it, was kind of the first and probably most critical step to this whole thing. A lot of attention gets paid to the videos that you see on Kickstarter pages, and I think those are necessary. It's worthwhile to have a video. What's not necessary is having something that is super crazily well produced and professionally done and that kind of thing. In our case, it was me in my backyard with a video camera in front of me talking about the magazine. What's important there is getting across that you are passionate about your project, that you have a plan to complete it, and that you are genuine and relatable as a human in doing this. I had a lot of people come to me and say, I watched your video, I loved it. I didn't love it. I didn't think it was that well done, to be completely honest, but it was me talking and people appreciated that, and that's what kind of did the trick. So don't sweat the video too much was kind of the point there. Our perks, the way we kind of laid it out on one end of the spectrum, obviously is the product that you're trying to sell on Kickstarter. Buy the first copy of the magazine or subscribe to the first 4 issues, that kind of thing. Stepped it up a little bit from there and offered some additional things, like we had a contributing photographer donate some photography that we got printed for select subscribers, get your name in the magazine, that kind of thing. At the other end of the spectrum completely is I came up with what I considered to be kind of a stretch perk that I did not expect was going to go anywhere. We did $2,000. You become an honorary publisher of the magazine. And if I'm being completely honest, what that meant was and still is a little bit vague. But we had 2 people put their money where their mouth was and jump in at that level. And there was some marketing around exactly that, maybe guilting people into doing that kind of thing a little bit, but it doesn't hurt to have those kinds of perks, and you might be surprised. The other piece of this was, because Kickstarter has that 30-day period, we announced what we were doing 2 weeks ahead of when we turned the Kickstarter on. Once that clock starts ticking, the clock's ticking. By getting it out there beforehand, starting to put it on social media, starting to tell my friends and family about it, developing an email list, bringing on social followers, starting to introduce people to the idea. When that clock started ticking, and as soon as that clock started ticking, we had donations coming in, we had support, we had a lot of social media stuff going on, and we were able to really hit the ground running on this. Once we hit our goal, which was far less than the $25,000 that we raised, we hit our goal in, I think, 25 hours. And if I'm being completely honest, that was entirely from, me putting it on social media, people passing it around, an email list, all that kind of stuff. But what that meant was the rest of the 30 days, for the most part, I was able to slack off and not be quite as stressed about the whole thing. But within 48 hours, we were a project we love on Kickstarter, which is basically just this badge and some additional branding that they put on your page to separate out the projects on the platform that they see as the best. The way Kickstarter says, or the criteria that Kickstarter gives for that is having a simple product image. Ours was just the front cover of the magazine. A detailed description, again, having a well-written and clear plan. Good imagery, again, good is kind of relative. Ours were just some mock-ups of the interior pages of the magazine. And then what Kickstarter calls a quote-unquote excited community, which really just means you had a successful first 24 to 48 hours in fundraising, which is kind of a hard thing to plan for, but that is something that they look at to get you this badge. And what this gets you is it puts you in a different place on their homepage. It gets you more organic eyeballs directly from Kickstarter versus the people that I was able to push to our Kickstarter page. Quick look at kind of the timeline of this whole thing. Within 48 hours, I think we had raised $15,000. The rest of that month, for the most part, is a pretty consistent but much slower climb. And then within the last 48 to 24 to 48 hours, we did another really big push. Last chance for these certain perks. Obviously, people can subscribe to the magazine after the Kickstarter is over, but there's a lot of perks that aren't available. So having that last big push in email and social did a lot for us in the very end here as well. Really quick look at where some of our pledges came from. What we ended up doing, which I think is it worked really, really well for us, was we took our website and made some kind of subdomain. I think it was just trailsmag.net/subscribe. And that was the link that we were giving out to everybody everywhere. In email, that was what we were posting on social. That was what I was telling people word of mouth. What that did was link to the Kickstarter page while the Kickstarter was active. And that's where that social media, 46% of our social media pledges came from that URL. But as soon as the Kickstarter ended, we changed that URL to then redirect to the subscribe page on our website. So there was, we were able to really keep our momentum going right through that 30-day Kickstarter period. There was no confusion on anybody's part. Hey, the Kickstarter doesn't work anymore. Where do I go? The link that we used then is the same link that we use now, kept everything consistent, very easy for people. I thought that really worked really well. A little bit of direct traffic. 10% of our pledges came from specifically an email that I sent 24 hours before the Kickstarter ended. A little bit of Kickstarter search, Kickstarter emails. Before the project launched, you can send people to your Kickstarter page. It doesn't show everything, but people can sign up to get an email as soon as the project launches. So that's where that comes from, and a little bit of Facebook. Yeah, so we ended our Kickstarter, or the Kickstarter ended about a month ago at this point. So I am still very much in the cleanup phase of that. The magazine doesn't hit mailboxes until February, so I don't have that to send to anybody. Just starting to send out some of the other perks. The big task right now is getting all the information that we need from our backers to be able to fulfill some of those perks. When they support, they don't give you their shipping address or anything like that. You have to go back to them for that kind of information. So I can answer more questions on that stage of things a little bit later. But yeah, the magazine hits mailboxes in February. If anybody is so inclined to subscribe, use that code, give you a couple bucks off, and feel free to reach out with any Kickstarter / magazine / anything else questions that you might have. Okay.
Hi, everybody. I'm Charlotte Massey, co-founder and COO of SheFly Apparel. And we make pants with a zipper so that everybody can go to the bathroom without removing clothing and exposing themselves to the elements or other people. I've got a pair over there that's going around the room. Feel free to take a look, check out how the zipper works. I'm wearing the pants right now. You can see how the zipper works. And we have won the Outdoor Retailer Innovation Awards. I've given a TEDx talk. We've done numerous accelerator programs and are now for sale nationwide in moose jaw mountaineering. And I've advised dozens of companies on crowdfunding. But when we did our crowdfunding campaign, it was a group of us from our college dorm rooms. We had no money. We used our campus job salaries to pay for prototyping and get us to a stage where we were ready to do a crowdfunding campaign. And there was absolutely no way that we were going to be able to do a manufacturing run without a crowdfunding campaign and getting the support of our community. We decided to raise on the iFund Women platform, partly because our product is very gender focused, and also because they had an additional $5,000 grant that we were eligible for by using the platform, but also because we had filed patents on our design at that point, but they had not yet been granted. And we were concerned about raising on Kickstarter because there is a tendency for people to see what ideas are getting a lot of traction and then rip them off. And we wanted to make sure that that didn't happen. The downside of raising an iFund Woman was that there was not very much traffic from the website. So we needed to drive almost everyone who contributed to the site in order to raise money. And our goal was to raise $15,000, and we ended up tripling that and raising almost $55,000 in just over a month. Thank you. So I'm going to walk you through the playbook that we use to raise. And I would say that most of the work of crowdfunding happens before you ever launch your crowdfunding site. First, you have to figure out the logistics and operations. Starting with, is crowdfunding even the right way to raise money? Because it's extremely difficult and extremely public. So if you fail, everyone is aware of that just the same as they are if you succeed. There are sometimes easier ways to raise money, like taking out a loan or using your savings if you have access to that. We did not, and so we needed to go the crowdfunding route, but it's important to be aware that it's not as easy as just putting up a site and the thousands of dollars start pouring in. It really takes a lot of effort to raise money. And then you have to decide on a platform. So we use different platforms. There's many new platforms that have started, and you should do research on which criteria meets the project that you're trying to raise for the best. If you're raising for a product, something critical to figure out is whether you can actually make the product. This is a picture of me modeling the very first prototypes that we got back from our factory that were made entirely with our design. They were made out of a suiting fabric because our factory didn't have any sample fabric of an athletic material. They had no stretch. I was incredibly lucky that they fit me so that I could take pictures, but this is what we used to raise. And it was enough of a viable product to show that we could do it. But I do wish that we had gotten a little bit further so that we would know exactly what the product would look like and understand the costing better. So that goes into the next point of knowing how much you need to raise. If we had raised $15,000, it would have been incredibly difficult to do a manufacturing run because your factories usually have minimums, and ours didn't, but we still were going to run into minimums with fabric and hardware and just all of the costs of importing goods between different countries. So some costs to keep in mind are all of your production costs, the cost of the other prizes that you're using, shipping, any packaging that you're using. Don't forget about import duties, and then also the cost of your time. You don't want to be stuck in a place where your product is priced where you can never hire someone else to support you. And then also, obviously, the platform fees and your manufacturing minimums. A lot of people end up crowdfunding and not raising as much money as they needed to, and then in order to fulfill orders, they have to take out debt, and you end up losing money from your crowdfunding campaign, which you absolutely don't want to do. And so it's important to make sure you're far enough along in your prototyping process to know how much you actually need in order to produce your product. And then whenever possible, simplify and build in buffer time. It might seem like a great idea to offer 4 different colors in your product or lots of different iterations, but that ends up adding costs, and it makes it much more complicated when it comes time to ship. And your backers are likely to change their mind about what they want, and then you spend hours and hours writing emails and trying to make sure that everyone is satisfied. Then you need to figure out your marketing strategy. So if possible, build your following and lineup press before you crowdfund. So that way, as Ryan said, you're able to raise as much money as possible as soon as you launch. We were on the She Explores podcast halfway through raising, and we raised $10,000 directly from that podcast episode. So figure out who your market is and make sure you have a strategy for how to find them. Then you want to invest in content, but try to delay the costs. This is a screenshot of our crowdfunding video that we worked with a small woman-owned production studio on, and they were willing to delay the costs until after we'd finished crowdfunding because we had no money to pay for production of a video, but we knew that we needed something that could describe the product as well as we possibly could. You definitely want to build a content calendar so that you're able to keep up momentum and not post everything that you have in the first couple of days and run out of things to talk about. And then, as Ryan said, begin teasing the launch with a countdown on social and email and make sure that everyone is prepared. So that way, as many people as possible invest right at the beginning, because it's much easier to get additional supporters once they see, okay, this project is actually going to go through. They're actually going to be able to manufacture, and so it makes sense for me to invest because I'm likely to actually get the product that I'm excited about. We were extremely scrappy, and so the way that we were able to reach our network was through network mapping. We made a giant spreadsheet for everyone on the team of every single person who we had connection to, how we knew them, and how much we thought that they would contribute, and then also mapped out what reward we thought they would be most excited about. This helped us think through how much we thought it was reasonable for us to be able to raise, and also which prizes we should be offering. And then it also gave us a blueprint for reaching out to everyone in our network. And we did reach out to everyone in our networks multiple times with thoughts on what prizes we thought that they would be interested in, as well as thank yous if they did end up contributing. And then we also made a list of every Facebook group and Slack group and every community that we were part of. And we joined as many as we could ahead of time and started engaging early. So that way, when we posted our ask, people already knew us and they knew that we were contributing to the community and we're going to be there for the long haul. Then you have to figure out what your rewards are. So these are the rewards that we used for our crowdfunding campaign. I would recommend having a variety of different price points, so that way it's accessible for everyone to be able to contribute, and not having any reward that's lower than $10, because with the platform fees, it ends up not really being worth the time. You also want to make sure that you're not going to waste a ton of money on the rewards. So you shouldn't put a reward up for the same price that you're paying for it. That doesn't help you at all with your manufacturing. It's also helpful if you can have partnerships with other brands. So we were the first custom cool cloth ever made, and Anastasia did the shipping for us. So that way we didn't have to spend all of the time shipping the product from their manufacturer to us, and then us shipping it out to everyone else, and it saved us time and money. And then you also want to think about who is likely to contribute and making sure that there is a reward for everyone. So not everyone is going to be interested in our product, but we made a unisex t-shirt so that way there was something for everyone to purchase. And then, as Ryan suggested too, having a monetary contribution or something that's at a higher price point, so that way if people are really excited about your product, they have the ability to contribute more. Then you're ready to actually launch your crowdfunding campaign. The biggest piece is to share as much as possible. So follow your content calendar. I recommend scheduling via posting app, so that way you're not spending all of your time in the platform. And calendar block your outreach. You're probably going to be spending hours a week doing all of that outreach to everyone in your network and go through your network mapping. And then you want to post on every Facebook group, post on LinkedIn, post in every Slack group that you've joined, and continue posting, because people are most likely to actually contribute after they've seen it from a multitude of different sources. I also recommend creating a media kit and sharing it with any friends who have similar brands or platforms, and make it as easy as possible for them to share about what you're doing. They are likely to, because it gives them something exciting to contribute to their community, and it makes it much easier, and you're much more likely to get content that's helpful for you if you write the copy for them. This is an example of one of our Instagram posts. I took this picture behind my dorm room showing our suit material pants, but it was enough to get us going and share what the concept was for what we were building. Then you want to maintain momentum. So you have to manufacture new opportunities for buzz after you've launched your campaign. Ideas are doing a sale, adding a new prize tier, or giving continuous updates on how close you are to your goal. We reached our goal within the first 2 days, so then we upped it and added a stretch goal and continued doing that as we reached stretch goals, so that way we continued having something to activate our community with. You can also utilize in-person events to keep up the hype. This is an Instagram post that we did after a launch event that we did at a distillery, And that was an extremely helpful way for people to come from our community and see the product, touch it, understand that we were actually going to be able to manufacture this, and then they were much more likely to contribute. I also recommend sending thank yous to everyone who contributes right away, with the additional ask of sharing the campaign if they didn't already, so that way you're able to reach their networks. And then you can also ask similar brands for products to raffle off, and you can do that through your social, so that way you're actively giving something back to your community while you're raising as well, because it can feel very extractive to just be constantly asking people for money. It's nice to engage them in a way that's actively giving back. Once you've finished your crowdfunding campaign, then the real work begins. You have to actually build and deliver a product. If you met your goal, now it's time to celebrate. You did it. It's amazing. Take a little bit of a break. You're probably exhausted. And you might not have. Lots of people don't meet their crowdfunding goals. And if that happens, then it's time to take stock of your options. Maybe you didn't have time to push hard enough, and so you just weren't able to reach your goal because of capacity. It's also possible that your product just isn't a good match for the customer that you thought that it was. And so it's an opportunity to take a step back and rethink and see if there's a different way that you can launch your product in a way where it will resonate with your customers and they'll want to contribute. Crowdfunding campaigns are a really useful way to find out if a product is viable before you put a bunch of your money into manufacturing it. And so it's good to take the information that you learn from a crowdfunding campaign instead of just ignoring it and moving forward. As Ryan said, it's super helpful if you can keep pre-sales live on your website. So that way you don't just immediately have a cutoff and people who find out about you 3 days after the crowdfunding campaign aren't able to support you. And then you want to send frequent follow-up emails to keep your followers updated on the manufacturing process. We had a huge issue with our manufacturing process because there was a pandemic and our factory went bankrupt and shut down in the middle of our production run. So, yes. So we were able to produce a little over half of the units and ship those out to customers, and we had to wait another 1.5 years before we were able to get product for the rest of our customers. We lost a ton of money because we'd already bought all of the fabric and hardware that we needed for production, and we weren't able to get that out of India. And so we had to start over. And we were able to do that because we gave very extensive updates to our backers throughout the entire process, so they understood what we were going through. And we only had 2 people ask for refunds. Everybody else wanted us to keep their money because they wanted the product more than they wanted their $90 back. And it's because of that that we were able to do our second manufacturing run and deliver product to customers, and that's how we have product in stock now. Once you actually get your product, you want to make sure that you confirm the addresses before shipping, especially if it took you 2 years to finish delivering product. People have probably moved. And once you ship it out, there's nothing that you can do. The customer will probably email you telling you that they never got it, and you either have to send a second product out and lose money, or they just don't get their product, which is not a good way to have people want to place additional orders. As much as possible, minimize you doing the shipping yourself. This is my co-founder with a stack of packages that we had to mail out. We did all of it ourselves, and that took a ton of time, but it was the only option that we had. And then once you've delivered product to all of your crowdfunding backers, make sure that you keep prioritizing them. They invested in you, they're what allowed you to get your company off the ground, and they're going to be your biggest supporters. So make sure to keep that as a separate email list and reach out to them with updates and with early discounts, and make sure that you keep bringing them along for the ride. It's because of crowdfunding that we were able to launch our company, and we will likely be crowdfunding again. So I really believe in this model, but it's very difficult and it requires a lot of groundwork, especially if you're doing it without any business or money to start with. It can be a lot easier if you are able to hire a media company or do paid ads to support your crowdfunding. But if you're not able to, you just have to do the work of building a grassroots movement and bringing people along for the ride. Hopefully you all got a chance to see the product going around. We have it in stock. You don't have to pre-order it. It'll deliver immediately instead of years in the future. And I've got a discount code there, OMS30 for 30% off of our Go There pants. Thank you. Oh.
And we have plenty of time for questions. So back here first. Yep, yep.
For us, we took a quick class through I Fund Women, and they provided some of the information of how to do grassroots crowdfunding. And then besides that, we learned by trial and error. And I have helped a lot of other companies crowdfund, and so I've seen things that work and don't work throughout the process. There's not amazing resources for how to crowdfund, so we're happy to be able to share what we've learned.
Yeah, Google was about it for me.
How much time it took to get that? How much the biggest people who, if you write about a product that doesn't.
Definitely. Well, we went to Outdoor Retailer. We got on She Explores because I heard Gail's voice and walked over to her and stuck out my hand and introduced myself and asked if we could be on the podcast. A lot of the other press was local Vermont press. We went to Middlebury College in Vermont, and that's where we launched the company. And we'd also been active for a year already, so people knew that we existed within our community because we'd been prototyping and pitching at pitch competitions and things like that. We made a press release and sent that out to as many people as we could, but we didn't have access to big media, so a lot of it was just being scrappy. And then also telling a compelling story. People love a story of college students trying to solve a problem, and we really pushed our founding story and the narrative that we had of women trying to do something big. We got a shout out in Forbes after the crowdfunding campaign for being one of the few young women-based crowdfunding campaigns that has seen success. It's quite difficult to be scrappy and raise the amount of money that we did. And so I think just telling our story and reaching as many people as we could is how we did it. I'm sure people here would have better ideas of people to email than I did in 2019. Definitely. A big challenge for us was figuring out the right order to do things in. Patenting is really expensive and complicated, and there's a huge discrepancy in the number of young people and the number of women who have patents. We've testified to the US Senate about the importance of representation and inclusivity in the patent process. And so for us, we didn't have money, right? And so we had to decide, do we raise on this idea and risk losing the IP, or do we prioritize the IP? And so we decided to file our patents first, and we found a law firm that was willing to work with us at a decreased rate, and we used our summer job money to file the patents. And then once everything was filed, then we launched the crowdfunding campaign. But it was terrifying because they weren't granted yet. And we knew that companies have been ripped off from crowdfunding, but we didn't have another option to get the amount of capital that we needed to manufacture. So if it's an option, getting private loans is a much safer way to launch a company that's based on IP, but it wasn't something that was available to us. We tried that for sure. Most of the manufacturers who we talked to wouldn't work with us because we didn't have a technical design, we didn't have a tech pack yet, and we wanted to manufacture like 500 pants. And most factories want you to be manufacturing thousands of pants, especially if it's a technical product. We started looking at factories in the US and they particularly turned us down, and it would cost us like $80 to manufacture, so we would lose money on making our first run of product. We found our first factory because my professor had met the owner at a conference and introduced us. And the owner of this factory, it was a fair trade and zero waste factory in Dharamshala, India, was willing to work with us. And I spent 3 weeks there living with the assistant manager, cooking dinner with his wife, and overseeing our first round of production. So we definitely got lucky. And it's really difficult as a small brand without connections to find manufacturing partners. It really depends on what type of patent you're filing. There's design patents and utility patents, and then you can also start by filing a provisional patent and then turning that into an official patent once you get further along. We've probably spent more than we crowdfunded on IP at this point.
For me, it was just consistency, being, having, like Charlotte said, following your media content calendar, having consistent emails and consistent social posts, and consistently trying to reach out to new people, and just not letting up, keeping the ball rolling as much as you can on your end.
For us, it was definitely press. So the She Explores podcast, having new articles come out, and we also pitched, hey, we successfully met our goal. Look, we've doubled our goal in order to get additional follow-on press, showing that we were experiencing success. And then just continuing to post and message people, as well as the other things that I mentioned, like adding additional prize tiers, doing giveaways, and anything that you would normally do to try to build a following.
It's been a challenge for me because social media is not really my thing. Not to mention, like Charlotte said, once your crowdfunding ends, the real work begins. You're incredibly busy. There's so many things going on. So yeah, it's been very difficult for me to keep that momentum up. But now that we have a successful crowdfunding campaign, we have the resources to bring in more help with that kind of thing and find different ways to do that. So it's been a process, but yeah.
For us, we spent 1.5 years having not fulfilled all crowdfunding orders, and so keeping momentum up was definitely a challenge. I did a lot of Instagram lives and takeovers talking about the manufacturing process, so probably every 2 weeks for a year, everyone would see my face explaining, okay, so now the fabric has made it to India, but it's stuck in customs. Okay, now the factory shut down because of COVID, and we don't know if we're going to be able to get everything out. Okay, now everything's on the boat, but it's going to take like 2 months to get here, and then now the ports are closed, and here's why everything is happening the way that it is. So just turning the struggles that we were going through into content that people were really excited to hear about, especially during the last couple of years when supply chain challenges have become a point of common conversation. And then we also kind of became more of an advocacy account than a store account. So instead of talking about how you should buy the product and how great it is, we spent a lot of time highlighting other groups that were trying to do similar things and talking about why our zipper is so important and why it's important to have equality in apparel. And so shifting away from just the product and talking about the values and the process that go into building the company.
Yeah, I think that's a good point too. And something that we're doing is 90% of the content and social and all that we're doing right now is around the process, where we are in the process, talking about what we're doing, what, what our designer's working on, what paper we're choosing. All those little details are, people who are interested in the magazine are interested in those kinds of things. So that's a real ready source of content.
Relative value of Kickstarter, your crowdfunding platform is perfect for your product. Got a product I'm working on, and I'm questioning the value that Kickstarter brings to the table as opposed to just doing it yourself. There are some downsides, like, for example, what if you reach your goal in the first 48 hours, but you can't, if you're a Kickstarter, you have to go the whole 30 days,
Mm-hmm.
and so that slows you down 30 days. So it takes another 30 days, and if you don't get the, you don't hit your goal, you not only don't get the money, but you don't get the contact information about people who are interested in that kind of thing. Is there a case, since you're going to have to drive most of the traffic to Kickstarter anyway, just market it on your own?
I'm sure there is. The reason I steered away from that is, for whatever reason, right or wrong, I think having it on a platform like Kickstarter offers a lot of credibility to you and what you're doing. Like I said, if we had just thrown it up on our website and I sent it out to my friends and family, if that gets passed to somebody else who doesn't know me, it seems a little funny. Like, here's a website for a magazine doesn't exist yet. That said, was just my perception beforehand. I'm sure there is a circumstance where you can kind of break through that, though.
Yeah, I would say it really depends on the individual circumstance. Like if you already have a website, you're already set up to take orders, you already have a strong community, and you have at least enough PR that people have some trust in you, then it can make a lot of sense to not use a crowdfunding platform. If you don't have a website and you're not set up to take orders, it's expensive to get all of that set up, even using the ready-made tools that exist now, and you still have to pay credit card fees when you take orders on your own site. And so using a crowdfunding platform does add legitimacy. I think it's also a lot easier to get PR if it's a crowdfunding campaign that has a set time frame, because it's more of a press event rather than just, oh, this company is taking pre-orders. Part of the benefit of a campaign is being able to have a PR moment and get the word out. And so if you want to take advantage of that, it's a lot easier if you use a platform. But there are lots of platforms that have sprung up that don't have the 30-day window and that don't make you reach a certain goal first. So I would look into one of those.
We got one more.
Yeah, when we launched, they weren't options yet. It was not legal to crowdfund for equity. We've definitely looked into them since then. And we haven't done one yet, but we certainly haven't ruled it out. It's a really cool idea to have your supporters be also co-owners in the company.
I did not. That wasn't a route that I was, frankly, particularly interested in going.
Awesome.
We're good.
Thanks to Ryan